here. I love coming to this conference. I tell people all the time it's my favorite, mainly because I spent a full day yesterday in a workshop learning about new ways of working with people who are also really interested in learning about new ways of working and people who knew a lot about those ways of working. Honestly, there's nothing better. And then the only thing better probably is seeing a lot of old friends, colleagues, people I've known for 20 years in this industry. Um, and they've all had one question, which is, Nick, what the hell are you up to these days? So that being someone who's a huge fan of efficiency, this is a perfect opportunity to tell you all a little bit about Pininfarina, where I've been for about the last year, a little bit what my role is as innovation lead, and then I'll be joined with Amir to talk a little bit about how we're thinking about new ways of working in what is a 90-year-old company. Excuse me while I fiddle a little. So as I said, Pininfarina has a long legacy as an automotive design company, families run company from the beginning out of Torino, Italy. I am not, or I can say this out loud, I'm among friends. I'm not a car guy. I wasn't prior to joining Pininfarina, so I had a little homework to do. This next slide I put together literally in the last few days to give you a bit of a primer. So even if you're not a car guy, you probably understand these cars. Starting on the left, we have the Italia, has the distinction of being the first automobile in MoMA's permanent design collection. The Testarossa I drew in drawing class when I was a kid. I didn't know anything about cars. The 1970 PF Modulo still looks futuristic today. All the way up to the Battista on the right, which is the first automobile not to be just designed by Pininfarina, but produced as well. Going along with this tradition is a tradition of technology and integration of technology into design, which I think is very interesting to this group. I mean, we're looking at dates like 1967 for the Computation Design Center opening. I think the first wind tunnel in Europe for automotive design, one of the first 7 in the world, was built there. Numerical Control Machine Center, again, we're talking 1976. And then 1986, the idea of branching out, looking at design more holistically, how we can approach different problems like product design, experience design through the same lens. And then more germane to our discussion, the opening of Pininfarina USA in 2013, about 10 years ago. So today we're a 360-degree design house. We do everything from transportation, architecture, interiors, product design, lifestyle, and design strategy. We're a global company at this point. The American office is headquartered in Miami, but recently we've been growing a team in New York, Amir being part of that. Lydia is also here. It's fantastic, a lot of energy happening right now. I'm going to talk to you a lot of words we don't usually talk about in these contexts, especially architecture conferences. I'm going to talk about elegance. We do talk about performance, but I'm going to talk about how style can actually impact in performance and vice versa. And then how these can actually lead to, the word that we never discuss, which is beauty, and how beauty can be actually a part of the performance of a project. This is a great way of thinking about it. Obviously, the spoiler of a car, very technical inspiration, but the expression becomes a cultural artifact, right? So now we'd get to jump into architecture, staying pretty close to cars. So this is, and again, I'm going to show a lot of projects because it's a lot of stuff I think people in this room haven't seen and should see. So this is a project we literally is under construction right now. Again, close to automotive design. It is essentially a country club for cars, another concept I didn't know existed. But essentially, the idea is if you are a car aficionado, have collector's card, you can keep it here, take it out on the track. Good way to spend an afternoon if you're in Miami and have access to a Ferrari. So I highly recommend. It is under construction right now. I'm slated to open in the next few months. But of course, it's not just automotive design. We try to take this idea of elegance, simplicity, just beauty, and apply it to all sorts of different typologies. Housing is a big one, and basically not just thinking about the building as an artifact or just a piece of industrial design at a larger scale, but thinking about lifestyle, thinking about how these spaces are used, and how architecture can play a role in this. This is a particularly exciting time for us. As I said, the American office has been around for 10 years. We're in a period of pretty quick construction of a lot of these projects that have been on the boards for quite a while. We just got what we were just looking at from our client yesterday, so that's exciting. And we work, especially in the American office, a lot of times in cities that aren't on the front pages of design press or projects you would expect. So this is a recent project in Panama City. And here the idea of beauty becomes important because it doesn't just, it's not just something that you're using to sell a project, but you're using it as a way of talking about what's possible in this place. And so each project that we do in some of these locations gets a bit easier because it's a little bit of a different context that we're working in. But of course, we work on projects that don't necessarily even have a site. The idea of design thinking is that, at least at a place like Pininfarina, is that scaleless. So we can work on something like a living pod in India where it can live in a lot of different places. But then the idea of performance is really about the specificity of climatic conditions, about enclosure, about how you can assemble and disassemble the components that make up this pod. And this is very near and dear to my heart. I have a background, for those of you know, in metal fabrication. It's really fun to work at this scale, get down to the nuts and bolts. But at a place like Pininfarina, it's always about the experience. It's always about how that impacts the human, how we engage with that designed artifact. So lots of ways of measuring performance. This is an example where, we expanded the brief, where we were given a certain amount of square footage and, I guess, square meters and the types of spaces that should be in this project. And we really dug into kind of a microclimatic analysis of the space and tried to kind of carve out an outdoor space in what otherwise could be a pretty inhospitable climate to that, and something that, again, was not asked of the project that we brought in. And the way we did this was through storytelling. We often kind of hone our storytelling in installations, such as this project at Milan Design Week. That was, again, all about microclimate. It was all about creating different experiences for the users at the scale of the human. And, this then goes very quickly into the realm of art. Like, where is an installation? Where is it art? We sometimes are commissioned to do art projects, which we do gladly. This is a installation called Speed Forms that lived in downtown Miami. Again, we were reached out to by a client and worked with local fabricators to create these. We also have worked with artists directly. This was an Italian artist named Patrick Tutafuoco, designed this lighting installation, and we designed kind of the experience of this cave-like structure that was all about the procession to then experience the artwork itself. More close to home, we also look for opportunities wherever we can to integrate our own custom art into our projects, to the point where the Planja, a great client of ours, a repeat client in Brazil, it's now become part of the overall idea of the project that Pininfarina will design a signature piece that responds to the architecture for each one of their developments. And I believe at this point, we're at 5 or 6 of these. And it's always a fun exercise. We get our industrial designers, we get our architects, we get everybody, and we kind of just get a big Miro board going for a couple weeks. Then we have great projects where the whole brief is to really make it about building scale art projects. So this is a air traffic control tower in Istanbul, Turkey, which, could work as an industrial design project, but happens to work at the scale of really landmark and making a place out of what is really could just be an infrastructural piece. Our projects allow us to explore dichotomies, different things that we're always working on, but don't maybe have the ability to take a step back and think about as much as we'd like to. So, for example, Design Miami, we get a chance to blur product design and art practice by creating a collectible piece of furniture, exploring new fabrication techniques and really fine-grained craft. So that's on the industrial design, that's amazing. As an architect, I think it's really fun when we can blow this up and go city scale, start to make an impact. And I'll just show some of the larger scale projects that are about taking the same idea, the same precision, and creating office towers, really larger scale pieces of the city with that same attention to detail. But as architects and designers, we have to think holistically, and I think that's our strong suit. I think everyone in this room thinks holistically. We think about systems, And it's amazing how that's not always common in the world. And I think we should all lean into that as much as possible. We've had projects where we get to think about these things at different scales. So for this community in Mexico, we were thinking about sustainability because the entire project was to build, yes, in an area that had not been developed, but with a very clear objective to keep 40% of the existing jungle area around the site, and then think about new ways of living and how that can't just be impediment to good design, but actually that infuses the design and makes it something different than you would otherwise expect. But of course, a way to build extremely ecologically is to look at the existing infrastructure around us. So Milan is very close uh, to our heart as a company. I actually made my first visit to the headquarters over the summer. And in Milan, we recently completed an adaptive reuse project, taking an old industrial project and building into a new workspace. Scale is something that's my favorite thing about being a designer, is that the same thought process can be applied at different scales. So we will take on a master plan project and work at a very large scale with the same kind of intensity and rigor, trying to apply ways of harmonizing design decisions and creating languages that make sense across scales. And then to cap off this introduction to Pininfarina, our design methodology, I just wanted to bring it back now to automotive design and talk about how it's not just a one-way street where our architecture and experiences are infused with kind of this 90-year history of automotive design, but also now we're in an interesting place where our automotive design or transportation design is starting to take some of these lessons about how we live or how we could live in the future and bring it in. So I'm going to apologize in advance for somewhat dramatic music that's going to play in this, but I'm just going to let this video play because for me, I think it's a really fun way of thinking about how what we build can actually change how we live. So this is AC Future is a startup that's creating this concept, and they're pretty far along and are hoping to be creating this this model fairly soon. Okay, that was a lot of design for a technology conference. Anybody who knows me knows I feel very strongly design technology. It should be a blurred. It is this more or less the same thing. I think technology is a way of designing, and designing is a way of applying technology to the world. So I kind of, when I found this quote by our founder, it spoke a lot to what I've been thinking, but not saying as well and in terrible Italian. But that design is the instrument to humanize innovation. So really that's what we're doing every day, is like, you can come up with a technological solution, but if you just put it out into the world without considering all of its cultural implications, you haven't done your job as a designer. So I want to bring this back to what I've been wrestling with as just like a design leader or technology leader within a company like this. Is I think all of us in this room agree that design technology, they kind of sometimes can run parallel. And the trick is like, how do we bring them closer together, right? I think that's what we're all trying to do. For me, this is the perfect interplay for me personally, for I think even our teams. The more we can interweave and go in and out from one to the other, and actually not even put a name on it when we're doing one or the other, that's the ideal. Here's a really dumb example of literally what I've been working on to try to make this happen. We've all built panel configurators for architecture because it's something that takes a long time to model and gets in the way of creativity, because ultimately you just want to explore a lot of options quickly. There are a lot of ways of doing this. I've been doing it for 15, 20 years, and in a lot of different ways, and mostly terribly. This has given me and a chance to take a step back and think more holistically about, the things we usually do, which there are a lot of steps. We make panels, we have a lot of parameters for each individual panels, but those panels are in systems. Now, like we have corner conditions, we have different ways that those panels come together. Trying to build a system that can anticipate that, and then sometimes we facet the panels, sometimes we curve the panels. A lot of times in the past, for me personally, this means building another script or another way of working for all just these little changes. So the idea was to bring it all into kind of one piece. Again, this is alongside the design work. This is just kind of like, this is a little bit rumination of how this stuff could be done better. This looks a lot like one of Andy Payne's new components that we looked at yesterday. A lot of parameters, but you don't need most of them, right? Like the typical person in our design studios needs this. They just need the project they're working on. They need a couple drop downs of the type of panels they're working with, and they need to click build panels. So, that's the idea. Like, how can we take that original piece and make it really smart? So going back to automotive design, where you have a really complex piece of equipment, but you're only exposed to a certain aspects of it, that's the goal here. So now you start to see a lot more of those parameters, right? Where you have different widths and depths and everything else. This is all the assumption that you have the same width of the frame on all sides. If you start to click in, now you can go left, right, top, bottom. Like it just keeps going. And pretty soon you have this massive piece, right? I think the key is all of that's visible. You can configure it if you need to, but you really only need 90% of the time, you only need that top part. So this is the goal, I think. And then when we're talking about our teams, yes, this is the ideal, but we all know, anybody who's worked in a design practice, that in reality, they're not two perfectly equal intertwining pieces. It's more the design project is this big thing. And honestly, this is a breakdown of my typical day also. Design project's a big thing. Design technology is this thing that's running alongside it. And you can make a pretty nice choreographed ballet around how they interact and come in. But this is all I'm saying. Like, this is what I've been doing for the last year, is working on design projects, having a deliverable, taking a step back, figuring out what we can learn from that, and then taking those lessons into building better tools to work on the next project. Honestly, I think organizationally, if we could do this, and anyone who is a design manager at this point, I think this is the key to a lot of the impact that we could have and expanding what we need to do. The other thing is not just to have great specialists who know tools and know technologies, but to have great architects and designers who know tools and technologies, who work together with those specialists. That's why I'm really excited to be joined with Amir, who, it's great. No, because Amir is a lead architect at Pininfarina, who recently joined us and is implementing new AI workflows on our real projects every day. So happy to have you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Okay, thank you for 5 minutes. I tried to be fast about like what we are doing, but since the beginning that I exposed to AI in general and how we use it as an imagery, I've been always like thinking about how we can use it, not in a way that we always ask why we are using it. And this why and how goes to a notion of the people are talking about, is it replace our job? Is it architecture going to disappear, or will be a different world after the AI? So when I was like working with it, I realized that everybody in a world can access to this tool and generate images at some point. For me, it was kind of democratizing the design for everybody. Just like when something like Instagram happened. So you had filters, digital filters, and like a long line of professional photographers working with different filters and mechanics to have a certain photo and a certain tone. But Instagram and digital design and digital tools changed it. So photography didn't disappear. They were still doing their job and their art, but it has like certain aspect to it. This is like the feeling that I had at the beginning. We will be exposed to like many iterations in design. It doesn't matter how we're using it. So through those iterations, through those difference, and you cannot decide, and you all be in a place that what can I do and how I should go forward with it. And for me, it was the most question since I get involved with it in the technical aspect of it, and also uh, the fluidity of it. So from first, let's start to categorize the spectrum that we are dealing with. So we are dealing with simplicity to complexity. So we have a majority of options, a majority of potential that we can get from these two realms and within. And also, we can have a pragmatist way of thinking about the machines, or AI as we know, or the idealist way of thinking about it, without thinking about is it buildable or not, just about how we're going to deal with it. So for me, it was like start to asking some correct questions that why we are using it, and try to investigate the project somewhere in between. And then I realized that we are going through the steps. So I start to lay down those steps through the different projects that I've been using it. So the first phase, I call it like problem recognition. So it means asking the right question, why am I doing here? The second is articulation. So we need to have a specific articulation about the problem and what we are seeking. So this is our role. And why? Because it's the software or the tool that we are dealing with is prompt-based. So we have to articulate. And then through the communication, which I discussed this part on my yesterday's workshop, which is a technical aspect. So how we can communicate through our different mediums that we are working and get the feedback. And the most important one is curation. So after getting different results, we have to curating it. And this is how we can find our way through the age of an AI. And at the end, we can get through the assemblage. I think this mural board example is a daily work of mine, or that what I've been trying to implement within the theory and the practice and execution. So we usually start with a variety of options, and which comes from the logistics of the site and the requirements of the client. And then we start to articulate and how we can control that articulation. And through this, we kind of figure out a relationship with the machine, which are going back and forth. So after a while, I realized, so we are collaborating with each other. So I'm getting an input and controlling the input, receiving the output, and this curation and communication goes on and on until we settle on a desirable result or efficiency that we are looking for. And at the end of it, from the way that I categorize it in two different ways. So everybody is looking for visualization of the AI. That will happen suddenly because right now in Photoshop, you have a panel that you can use AI. So using AI in visualization and good quality image and rendering will be a really like humanized tool in your rendering engine or your Photoshop softwares. But the way that how we think about architecture and develop a concept and how we can settle in this variety of images and options is what I'm still working on. Okay, thank you so much.